Hello and welcome to Coffee with the Chairman. My name is Ruda. I'm the Chairman of the Canadian Business Council. And with us today, we have Siddharth Peters, who is the Managing Director of Total Office and the co-founder of Love That Design. Siddharth, welcome to Coffee with the Chairman. How are you today?
Good afternoon, Ruda. I'm doing very well. Thank you so much. Lovely day outside. Can't complain.
Lovely day outside indeed. It's the first few drops of rain for the season. Siddharth, for those of our viewers who aren't familiar, could you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and a little bit about Total Office as well as Love That Design?
Sure. So the Total Office is a workspace solution provider. So we provide products that range from office furniture right down to acoustics. We also provide contract fabric, green walls, and lastly, a whole range of writable surfaces to jot down your big ideas.
Very cool. Very cool. You know, one of the things I think was most fascinating to me when I was reading up about Total Office is that it's a family business. And this is, of course, a second generation family business. And I think that actually in the UAE, this is an underreported trend, which is the transition from the generation that was here during the 90s and the early 2000s during the really big boom into the transition to the second generation of who were previously kids who are now running their parents' businesses. It's that transitioning from one generation to another can be tough. What are some of the things that you've learned about managing and taking over as a second generation business entrepreneur?
Oh, so firstly, don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. I was born here in Dubai, so I got a chance to see Dubai sort of change over to the city it is, and I think the pace at which Dubai was never at this pace that we're currently at breakneck speeds to build this city and to make it into the commerce superpower that it is today. And I think from a family business perspective, you know, I came in probably to take over my father's business because his health was failing. And, you know, I think as a second generation, you tend to have to fit into very big shoes, very, very big shoes. And I think that was probably the biggest challenge, really. I think, you know, when your father sort of pioneers that space 20, 30 years ago, and then you've got to come in and go, okay, you know, and you come in, I think, fairly young too, right? You come in right out of university and you know, when you're young, you've got this, you can't be defeated. You feel bigger than, you know, life itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's the toughest part because you tend to get a reality check very quickly. And I think the tough part is, you know, when you deal with the previous generation who are all top CEOs and chairmen of businesses, they tend to look at you as a young pup. So you don't get taken seriously, which is fair enough. I get it because there's a lot of experience that you've got to build in business. So I think probably that's the biggest challenge when you come into a family business, trying to establish, you know, what you're doing for the business and how the next steps need to pan out. And I think the biggest concern that I had was I was given the golden handcuffs on day one, which was here's your business card and it says managing director. And I said, hang on, I've just shown up. You know, he said, no, don't worry, you know, keep the card. And I realized, you know, what problems that title was going to do for me internally with every day and every month and every year that went by, because my father sort of created that as a learning experience of any bit of information I didn't know. He'd refer back to that card and say, what does it say on that card? I'd be like, managing director, right? Okay, so you run the business and you don't know that answer, you know. So you had to learn very quickly.
Yeah. It's remarkable. Of course, you know, for many of the pioneering generation in Dubai, in many respects, and many of that generation went from nothing to something. And when we come back as the second generation, I also grew up here. When we come back as the second generation, it's no matter how much you accomplish, going from something to something bigger will always feel less than going from nothing to something. And so it's very difficult coming in with the expectations of being the managing director, understanding that, you know, there's like a ceiling on accomplishment that you can never actually get to, because it's just that difficult to overcome the accomplishments that preceded you. You know, you're in the sort of fit out space, in the interior design space, which is of course an interesting business, because it's gone from being an absolutely breakneck industry in the 2000s to an industry that I think has matured quite significantly over the last little while. A lot more competitive, and it's a lot more mature in the way it behaves. How has that transition been for your business? Because of course you've been here for that entire spectrum, up and down.
So great call. I think, Ruda, we, in 2000, so I came in mid 2003, and between 2003 and 2007, 8, just before the financial crisis, I mean, we had such a challenge, not just, I mean, obviously you were selling product, before it even hit your warehouse, which was a nice problem to have. But the downside to that was you just couldn't keep staff, because everyone was ready to pay double to get that kind of talent anyway within their firm. And that became a huge challenge to actually manage a business. So when 2008 sort of came through, it was a natural slowdown. It weeded out a lot of the companies that were there for the quick buck, which was kind of cool. And then you got slightly more solid companies sort of stand their ground, which was great. I think we fortunately did quite well through 2008 and 2010. And then, you had a steady growth again. And back in 2016, again, we had oil crash, and that was a little bit of a challenging moment. And it took out, again, a few of the competitors that were there at that time. And now, obviously, last year, which you had a global crisis from a pandemic situation. And we had a remarkably good year, all things considering. So I think what you've realized is, while all of these ups and downs sort of take place, as a business, you've got to look at your product portfolio, look at your work culture, look at your target audience, and realize that you're constantly moving these chess pieces. And it's and if you stay flexible and adaptable and really got I know this may sound like cliches, but really have your ear to the ground as to what's really happening in workspaces, and try to not match yourself to your competitors here locally, but find out who the best is in the globe, in the world, and really see what are they doing different, and you're able to understand that. And what you realize is the geography doesn't really make any difference. So if you've got a phenomenal dealership sitting in New York, yeah, sure, they're dealing with other competitors in New York too, but chances are they're probably doing something different to gain that kind of scale that you probably don't have in this region, just because of the sheer size of it. So there's a lot of learning that comes from there as well. So I think just understanding what the global landscape is and sort of applying that to your local market can definitely help.
Well, that's actually really good advice, Siddharth. But I got to get your advice on something else, because there's a lot of talk today about how office designs will just not be the same ever again after COVID. And there's a very strong feeling that the changes that have been wrought over the last year are going to be made permanent in some way, shape, or form. So I guess, from your perspective, because you're in the space, do you think that COVID will have a permanent impact on the way we think about our office spaces going forward? And what do you think that impact will be? And also, how will that impact the hottest trends in the world in your world at the moment?
So, I don't want it to sound like a magic ball type of situation, because I think one thing that I think the market was sort of moving towards, or at least I'd say probably 2018, 2019, was they had this whole, the whole term that was coined was resi-mercial, right? You're trying to bring more of the residential into the commercial space, because today people want slightly softer touches. They don't want the hard lines of desks and chairs and tables and life is good. So now you want slightly more collaborative spaces, more couches, more breakout areas, more places where you could sort of sit down and have a chat and really sort of brainstorm things without it being a formal setting of,
Right.
of a workspace. And I think what we've realized with 2020, with at least a lot of these firms shutting down for about a year and a half in terms of at least global firms. And, you know, we've furnished a lot of global firms and a lot of tech firms, especially, who really are the ones that make the news in the US. So we've done a lot of their spaces here in Dubai. And the one thing that we've really taken away from it is that everything they do in workspaces is experiential, right? They give the employee a reason to come to the office. They've got a cafeteria that they serve free food at. They've got a music room. They've got a set of sleep pods in rooms. I mean, what they've done, and each room has a certain theme. So you know, it sort of inspires you in that space. So you're feeling, you know, like you need to stare at the stars. They've got a room that looks like that, you know. So there's a lot of that. And what you've realized is that, you know, trends aside, colors aside, what you need to realize is that your company is filled with people. People need to be inspired. And you realize you're putting them in a building for so long. So what is going to inspire them sitting in a building? And you've got to create experiential spaces. And that's what, because work can be done anywhere, in all honesty, outside of your manager really holding a stick and saying, have you done the work? I mean, we're not in that world anymore. So I think if companies need to attract the best talent and make sure that they've got innovation and they're pushing innovation, I think creating experiential spaces and stop thinking about trying to fit the most number of people in a workspace is definitely going to be the way we're moving.
And that's really interesting. But it's also interesting coming from you for two reasons. You understand intellectually why a tech company can do the type of space that it does. Because, you know, a lot of tech companies, they operate in relatively high margin businesses and that are relatively labor unintensive. But of course, you know, you operate in an industry that can be quite labor intensive because, you know, fit out, there's no way to do fit out remotely. You got to be there with a lot of people. So how does what you learned from the techs, from what you're seeing at the tech companies apply to then the way in which you manage your office and your people? Because I'm sure that can also be, that's also challenging as well.
Yeah, I think, Ruda, I think workspaces, right? You know, if you see our workspace, for example, you walk in and you've got this beautiful rattan and soft seating sort of built in. And so we're trying to bring that indoors. You've got a massive set of 4 screens that sort of forms this video wall, which you could do a seminar from right at the entrance, you know, and it sort of overlooks the out through the window and outside into Dubai. We've got spaces that create completely separate environments where you can have discussions for. So I think, you know, when your clients come in and when your people are working all in the same environment and they realize, hang on, you work exactly how you are actually hoping our space looks like. You walk the talk. And I think really important. I'm not talking about the people sort of putting up drywall and say, I mean, at the end of the day, they're on site doing that kind of work. But when your own team is operating in those kind of spaces, in those kind of environments, then your client goes, you know, he's not just trying to sell us something. He believes it. They're working off of the same ideology. I want to do work with these companies.
That's very cool. I mean, of course, that means that we're all going to have to come by and check out your offices.
Absolutely. You're welcome. We got good coffee too.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for taking the time to have coffee with me. I really appreciate that. And I wish you all the success. I'm sure 2021 is going to be a fantastic year for all of our businesses, but especially yours.
Thank you, Ruda. My pleasure. Thank you so much, Canadian Business Council. Had a great time.
Take care. Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.